Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, getting back into my Christmas card series. So for today's video, I am creating with some of the new products from Honeybee Stamp's holiday cheer release. This is part of a video hop to kind of celebrate this new release. And I started with the new Lovely Layers Pinecone wafer die set. And right now, this just looks bizarre. I have a hardboard and I have some painter's tape, and I was taping pieces of the painter's tape face up, so sticky side up, onto this hardboard. Normally, if I was only doing like one of these, maybe two, I wouldn't bother with this, but I'm doing multiples because I was making a couple cards at once. So this kind of keeps everything a little more organized, a little more contained. And when I'm painting die cut pieces like this, I do like to do this little trick to hold things in place so I don't have to use my fingers or anything like that. So with these layered pine cones, they do look weird. Like when I was staring first time at the die set, I was like, this makes no sense. But it's one of these ones where you, once you die cut it and then literally adhere one together, it comes together so easily, and it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So anywho, I have all these random little funny pieces here, all die cut from watercolor paper, all stuck to that sticky side of the painter's tape. And then I'm just doing extremely simple watercoloring. I wanted that sort of texture, you know, variation in color. Although with a wafer die set like this, you could simply just die cut it from dark brown cardstock and it would look fabulous. But I was just in that mood to play around with watercolor. So I'm using my Prima Woodlands palette, and originally I was going to use like all the browns from the palette and really go in depth, and in the end I ended up only using two, just a dark brown and a light brown. That's it. Nothing special. And again, easy, because I don't do any sort of special layering or shading or blending. I am slapping on color and that's it. I got the pieces wet first, which is clean water, and then just slapped on the color. That's it. So I zoned right out. I talked about this in another video. I'm on, I think, the third book in the Outlander series on Audible. I've read all the books, watched the show, highly recommend. If you haven't read them, they're just fabulous. I cannot wait for the newest book to come out. Hopefully we will get it within the next 6 months or something. Anywho, I just zoned out to that, listening to that, and just putting on this watercolor. So I've sped this up quite a bit in editing, but even then it didn't take that long to do all these pieces since I'm just sticking on the color. So I kept going along, adding the color, not worrying about, you know, keeping anything smooth or anything. I wanted that like darker areas and lighter areas, that splotchy look, just to give it that texture. And I'm just using my little cheapo Nuvo paintbrushes. Yeah. When it comes to other types of watercolor, when you're really trying to, you know, like no line or just more detailed images, more in depth, that sort of thing, it really then starts to matter more when it comes to your paper choice, your brushes, etc. But for things like this, just go for it. And it doesn't even have to be watercolor. You could use like any like water-based dye inks. Oxide inks would look really nice for this too, because they would like oxidize with the water and you'd get different effects. All sorts of fun things. So I went along, and as they were starting to dry, because like most watercolors do, they dry back, aka they just lighten as they, you know, soak in and absorb into the watercolor paper. So I went back in and just, again, slapped on just more brown. I wanted them a little more intense, a little bit more color and whatnot. And then I let those completely dry. And then I put a bit of Picket Fence white distress paint just onto one of my plastic palettes. And I added just a little bit of water. You don't really need much with the distress paints because they're quite liquid in consistency, but I thinned it out a little bit, and then I had the presence of mind to pull out my splat box, which is a good thing I did, because I still got splatter everywhere, but this contained a fair bit of it. And then I just dragged my brush against the edge of that little palette and heavily splattered these with white. Just give them that, you know, nice little snow sort of a look. So I went along and used up every last little bit of paint that I had on the side of this. Removed a random cat hair, even though the cat is not allowed in my office because she's destructive when it comes to my things. Cat hair still sometimes likes to wander in at the randomest of times. But anywho, she likes to sit outside my office. In fact, as I'm doing this voiceover, she's curled up. That's where she likes to be sometimes, which is funny because she doesn't really care for me too much. But she curls up outside my office when I'm up here when the kids are in bed and that sort of thing. So, anywho, after I was done the splattering, after everything was dry, I started adhering these pine cones together. And literally all you do is you just go from like the biggest to the smallest piece. Altogether, there's 6 pieces that create this pine cone. It's part of Honeybee's lovely layers kind of series that they had started a couple releases ago now. And I'm kind of obsessed with them. They're so easy to line up, and these gorgeous things are just, I love it. So yeah, you start largest to smallest, and you basically just line everything up on the top edge. They're all just, the way it's designed, everything just lines up. It's super, super simple. Get them all lined up. And then the only thing is the very smallest piece. The first time I was trying to put it together, I realized, oh yeah, I just had to flip it around because the way my brain was looking at it, I was trying too hard to kind of line it up to the, you know, flatter end of this. And you just flip it around and it's great. It's done. Simple, easy. So I just kept repeating this process until I had all of these pine cones adhered with all of these little layers and texture and splatter and all that fun stuff. So I just kept going along, peeling them off of the painter's tape and then adhering them together with, I'm using Honeybee's liquid glue here. So any liquid glue is going to work for this. So got them all adhered, got all of the layers adhered, and then off camera, I also die cut. There are the little elements to do little pine branches and bows. So the pine branches I die cut from 2 different shades of green cardstock. These aren't meant to layer together. I was just doing that because I just thought they looked kind of cute. So I did one from like a lighter mint green cardstock and then one from an evergreen cardstock. And then some of them I kind of just layered together just to give it that variation. And then the bows I die cut from some Tonic kind of peachy pink cardstock. Funny thing is when I started this card I started with the pine cones there. And in my head, I was planning on doing like kind of a white on white card base, just letting the pine cones take center stage. And then this thing took on a life of its own. I pulled out this pink cardstock and then things just kind of snowballed from there. So I was using pink and mint and then So the bows come together really easily. There is a die for the like large part of the bow, a die for the band around the middle, and then a die for the tails. So I die cut that. You just adhere it all together and it's good to go. So you've got this cute little 3D bow. And then I pulled out the AmyR Buzzword wafer die. Just like all of Honeybee's, you know, large word dies, there's the word, the outline, and a second outline. I only use the word and the first outline. And I die cut the word from that same pink cardstock, and then the first outline I die cut from the same mint cardstock. And the word I die cut 3 times, so I could stack it together to give it that dimension that I just love. And then I adhered that to the mint outline. So I've got my pine cones, my bows, my little pine branches, and then my AmyR word. And then I pulled out some more Tonic cardstock. I have this Kraft brown cardstock from Tonic that is something I've never used before from them. It's very heavyweight. It has a very stiff texture. It's different and I like it. It's just different than the other Kraft cardstocks. And it's got one side's kind of warmer and then the other side's kind of neutral. So I cut a piece down to 7 inches by 8.5. And then I'm scoring it at 3.5. So this will make a 3.5 inch by 8.5 inch slimline card. Scored that with my Teflon bone folder and my score buddy. And then I die cut some more Tonic cardstock. The absolutely fabulous, if I can get down to Rose Gold Blossom Kraft Perfect Foiled Kraft cardstock. This is what I'd shown in the Rustic Rose haul that I did like a week ago, whenever it was. That's where this whole card kind of evolved into. I started pulling more and more products from that haul, and I just couldn't stop. So I die cut Honeybees Mistletoe Slimline cover plate from that foiled cardstock. And I had the hardest time getting pictures of these cards because the foil kept like, you know, reflecting the light into the camera lens. But anyway, die cut that, adhered it to the card base, and then started assembling this card. So I adhered the little pine branches with more liquid glue, just using kind of the glue on the base of them, and then the rest I just let pop up. These cards have a ton of like dimension and texture to them. They were just fun. And then I adhered the pine cones, and then the bows. And I used some little 3D foam squares here and there too to just kind of bolster up the bits and pieces, since again, there's like just so much depth and texture going on. And then the Merry Word, I adhered with the liquid glue. And then I pulled out the Merry Buzzword stamp set that coordinates with that die cut word. And I am going to stamp a couple of the stamps from that set onto that piece of the Kraft cardstock that was left over from cutting the card front. So I'm going to stamp those sentiments with clear embossing ink, and then I'm heat embossing them with the pearled pistachio embossing powder that was also part of this Rustic Rose collection. So it ends up being very subtle, but I was kind of happy with that. But again, I had the hardest time getting pictures of it. But my go-to is always to do like heat emboss sentiments in white, regardless of what color cardstock I use. But I kind of liked how that just minty sort of green color worked. So after I heat embossed it, I trimmed it down with my paper trimmer, and then I adhered them to the card. So it says, "Wishing you a Merry Christmas." And then on the inside of the card, I stamped a couple more sentiments from that Merry Buzzword set. And I did the same thing, anti-static powder tool, stamped the sentiments with clear embossing ink, and then heat embossed them with that pearled pistachio embossing powder. And on the inside of the card, it says, "To you and yours, from me and mine." Because I mentioned this a lot of times with Honeybees sentiment sets, they're all buildable, all sorts of options, something I just love, because especially you can add, you know, more to the inside. So that technically finished off the card, but I couldn't resist adding some Nouveau stone drops. I have these gorgeous rosebud pink stone drops. So I added these to all the sort of berry areas of this mistletoe cover plate die cut. Just went along and added it wherever they would fit. And then as they dry, they have this like, almost like a sandy or pebbly texture to them. Very different. Kind of like it. So went along and just added that here and there. My initial thought was to add them how I normally do, you know, in uneven numbers and just dots and triangle order and that sort of thing. But rather than do that, I just went along and added it to that cover plate die cut just to kind of fill everything in. And I loved it. I loved how it turned out. It was fun. These were such fun cards to make. And again, the texture and the color especially, this is not a color combo I would normally go for. So like I'd mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is part of a video hop. I'll have info and links in the description box below the video, and I will have a supply list and a link to my blog post and all the info. You can check that out in the description box below the video, as well as on my blog. Thank you all so much for watching and for subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting. Stay tuned. I have a whole bunch more videos coming, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.